Okay, I'm back. I went ahead and got this started up in here. I basically started the bottom cap up in there just a thread or two, and then I actually took the shaft and threaded it down in there some. I don't want to get it too far in either direction, and then I'll get started. One thing I noticed whenever I took the caps out, this is the old caps. This is kind of like what's left of the O-ring on that one that scarred that shaft up really bad. Luckily, I had some spare O-rings out of an O-ring kit that I got at one of the, I think it was Harbor Freight or somewhere. Actually had some that was real close enough to match. So I'm going to put it down inside of this cap here that I'm replacing on the other side. Of course, I've already installed some high temp disc brake type grease a little bit in both of these. I didn't do a whole lot. And like it said in the directions, I already took the alamites out, so as I'm adjusting these back and forth, I don't have to worry about the hydraulic pressure of the grease doing anything. Of course, you also saw earlier where I had actually put the slits in the arm or the shafts themselves. Sorry guys, kind of tongue-tied this evening. So that way it would help the grease to travel back and forth. And this is kind of a back and forth game. Here you got to run it down on the shaft a little, and you got to kind of spin them both. And the whole idea here is to work both of them in until they're basically bottomed out inside the shaft. And then we've got to center the main shaft here in between the two. But you don't want to turn either one of them too awful far and have it bottom out. So I'm having to rotate this shaft back, and they can be a little bit difficult to turn even with the grease in there. So what I was doing was actually taking some of the, well, that's not it. Nothing's there where you need it. This will work. Taking a drill bit or something to kind of move the shaft around so that I can tighten these up. And then I'm taking my 1 1/4 socket. It's kind of a tight fit. These are a little buttered up where I've used a pipe wrench to get them off, I guess. I'm going to start tightening that down slowly and kind of watch to make sure I'm not peeling any threads out like those other ones were. I'm still not sure what was going on with the other caps. But if you notice right here, I've already got the bottom one turned in a pretty good amount. You can see that edge right there, so I'm going to go ahead and try to get this one down about an equal amount. But the whole time I'm doing it, I'm going to check this shaft and make sure that it's not gotten tight on me. Because like I said, I don't want to start pulling these ears together, because what happens is that's going to pull that pivot section in too tight. That's starting to go now. Should have took a file and cleaned these nuts up a little bit better. The socket doesn't want to sit on them real good. Okay, yeah, we're still okay. Let's see. Tighten this one up a little bit. I think I might have chewed the threads up on this one that I'm doing now. That's the first one I tried that old one. I'm sorry, the new caps on, and I'd say I probably chewed them up a little bit. I stopped before I messed them up too bad and had to replace the control arms. There's kind of a mixed bag on some of these. A lot of guys said that they would have just as soon bought a set of rebuilt ones. Hindsight being 20/20, and what I'm going through now, especially with those new caps, that would probably have been money and time ahead if I had went ahead and just got a set of rebuilt ones that already had all this in place. You could still do all of the stuff that I'm doing to it now just by disassembling it, and it would probably been a lot easier. For what I spent on the refurbishing kit for this thing, I would have probably been money ahead to have went ahead and done that, considering that I'm only using the shafts and part of it. I cleaned the old shafts up that I took out, and I could have probably reused those, but I was kind of concerned about that one particularly that had that gouge in it. Right there. Now that was from where the O-ring had basically rubbed on it because there was no grease in it. But, you know, seeing as I bought those shafts, I'm going to go ahead and use the new ones. Finish getting this thing lined up in here. Looks like I've just about got them seated. And the shaft feels like it's still turning pretty easily. There will be some resistance, but not a whole lot. since I've already got them started, I don't have to worry about them getting sidetracked. I'll just use my wrench. Snug it down. Okay, we're still doing okay. You basically want this thing down to where there are no threads showing, but you don't want to get too carried away tightening these, because basically all they're doing is just holding that pivot shaft in place. They're not really made to keep the shaft from turning. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. You want it to turn because that's what actually lets the suspension work up and down. So we'll just get those snug. I think it says about 25 foot-pounds on the shop manual. I'm not even worried about if I get it that tight or not, just as long as I've got them snug down to where the threads are seated. And that feels about like where I've got it, and they look pretty even. That spins pretty good. Now I'm going to take my micrometer. I'm actually going to check to see how far off we are. I'm going to check the gap between one of them, and basically what I'm doing, see if I can sorry about that, get you over here and show you what I'm doing. I'm basically sticking it in there from the bolt hole up to the top of that cap, so if the shaft truly is centered, both of these dimensions should be the same. And as you can see, got a pretty sizable gap, which indicates that the shaft has to go up toward this one, so that this gap will get smaller and this one will get larger down here at the bottom. So I'm going to put you back on the tripod. Stand by just a second. And we're going to continue to adjust that until we get that gap even. Yeah, that looks like probably a couple of turns. There's quite a bit of difference. Okay. Plus you can also see here where this shaft looks like it's seated deeper into the nut than this side is, so that's a pretty good indicator too. That'll get you close to eyeballing it. But basically I'm just going to take and spin this, which I did put some grease inside of these before I started. That looks like that may be pretty close. We'll see what we got there. Of course, I'm going to have to loosen it up again, check again here. Tighten that up. I started out trying to read the readings on it, and then I figured out that once you got them both the same, it would either be go or no go. And if you notice, you can probably see the marks I've got on these. This indicates that's the side of the shaft that the bolt head goes on. So I think this is actually going to be centered when I get this right there to where the bolt heads are in the back. Let's see what we got here. Oh boy, it's not off much. Let's see what we got. You know, sometimes you may have to get as close as you can get it from one side to the other. Actually, it looks like I'm going to have to come down. I'm sorry, go up another turn. See if it'll take another turn to where those heads, the bolts will be up. Let's try that right there and see what we got. It looks like I may have went too far the other way. I may just have to get it halfway in between and say that's close enough. Because unfortunately the side that the bolts come through on, you pretty much have to stick with that, because those bolts have little knurls on them. And oh yeah, that's too much. So we're going to have to go back down a turn and say that's good enough. Before I get that thing turned all the way back around where it's going to go, I am going to go ahead and I got to find them first. Drive those bolts back through those control arms. Oh, there they are. I'm going to match them up to the markings that I've got on them, so that way they go back in the same hole they came out of, because it looks like even though these have splines on them, they put little weld beads on them, I guess to help ensure that they were going to stay on them. And for some reason I can't get this rubber plastic off here, I guess because of grease on my hands. About 10 minutes, okay. I'll tell you what, this stuff, good stuff. Come on. There we go. Let's see, so that's the X. That goes here. I watched several good videos today. ZZ Astro had some up, and HPR had several up as usual. Several good ones on his, talk about his air compressor and a lot of those things. Then I saw where Greg Porter is just about ready to assemble his Carmageddon onto the frame. Got all of his pan and everything finished up and ready to go back together, so that's cool. Today is BW Darren's birthday. Happy birthday, Darren. Hope you had a great one. Talked to him for just a second this morning. There we go. Okay. So, that basically finishes up the rough assembly of these things. Of course, at some point, right before I put them in, I'm going to go ahead and put the alamites back in and grease them. I'm going to probably end the video here. I'm getting pretty close to my 15-minute limit. And I'm going to flip this back around just a little bit so that I can put tack welds on the bolt heads on this shaft so they don't move. And then go ahead and put a tack or maybe two on the caps on this thing. So that way I can make sure it doesn't move. And at that point, we'll be getting ready to start reassembly again. This was probably the last major hurdle as far as getting everything ready to go back on the car. As far as the front suspension goes, I'm going to do a mock-up on it to make sure that everything's going to line up and all my bolt holes and everything are correct. Then take everything back off, and then I'm going to start on the rear suspension. That's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going back with an 8-inch axle, which was what was on the car. When I get ready to start doing that, you guys will kind of get an idea of where I'm going with that. It's going to be a little different, and hopefully I can get everything to work out. If not, I may have to go back to the old 8-inch axle. I've still got it. But I'm hoping to do something a little bit more updated than that that's going to help the car handle and corner better. So with that, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.